All right, what's going on, everyone? So we're going to do a little Ukraine war update today. We've got a couple different things we're going to look at, starting out with a battlefield update, looking at some Ukrainian advances in Kursk for the first time in a while. It's been 6 months, for what it's worth, since Ukraine moved into Kursk. We've got, let's see, a leaked peace deal that may give us an idea as to what the Trump administration is looking to do to bring an end to this war. We've got competing spy videos from the CIA in the U.S. and the SVR in Russia, and then we'll wrap it up with some nonsense because I probably shouldn't spend my time on like the debunking X stuff, but sometimes I can't help myself, and it's hilarious, so we're at least going to spend a little time on that. Now we're doing this live, so we'll wrap up the second half of the video, just Q&A, kind of off the cuff, wherever we want to take it. But let's go ahead and get started with a look at some battlefield updates here. So two key areas we're going to focus in on is Kursk up here in the northern part, like the only portion that's blue, and then we're going to head down here to Toretsk. So starting out with this, moving into Kursk, it's been 6 months since Ukraine kicked off their Kursk operation. This is Russian territory, this blue area here, and Ukraine is in there. So you can see this gray area around the outskirts is kind of the extent to where Ukrainian forces were able to occupy at the peak. They've generally been pushed back into what is now this blue area here. Just yesterday, we started to get news that they might have been advancing again, and the area they were advancing was right down through here. It was this road, make sure it's showing up correctly on the screen, this road here looked like Ukraine pushed maybe, according to Russian sources, as many as 2 armored battalions, which is a fair number of troops. 3 total battalions is the number that I'm hearing. There are reports this morning, there's a little bit of confusion in Russian media, if these 3 towns here are actually under Ukrainian control. So as far south as Fensiva, and again, you know what I'm going to do is pull up a satellite view to give you an idea. These aren't very big areas, which is why when it's like, well, is it a town? Is it a village? There's just not a lot there. So this is one of those. Oh, of course, it's going to take a minute to load. We'll go back. Is it going to do it? Come on, computer. You're on the spot. Go back to the standard. It's easier. So, anyways, there's confusion as to what Ukraine actually holds in this area right here. It looks like today they haven't advanced any further. A lot of the videos we're seeing out of Russia right now are showing destroyed Ukrainian equipment. Again, I would say anytime one side is going on the offensive, you're going to see more of their equipment destroyed. And it does look like, at least, the real-time photos and videos we have, there has been a fair number of Ukrainian losses in this advance. However, there's also concerns on Russian channels that Ukraine may even be on the outskirts here of Ulanok is what we're going to go with. Again, lots of small towns and villages that are kind of popping up for the first time. There's never been a reason for us to really get into this little town here, and now all of a sudden there is. So the pronunciations are going to be all over the map, but no pun intended. But the Russia right now, there's some channels that are saying Ukrainian forces may have made it this far. Now, it's not entirely clear what the goal is there, right? If you really want to get into it, you can talk about maybe they're trying to cut off any Russian forces that are, able to maybe come in. Maybe this would be Ukraine trying to push something across the border down here, and they're trying to seal off a northern approach all the way to this road so they could isolate a certain segment. I don't know. You're talking about small chunks is the thing, right? 2 to 3 battalions is big at this point in the war, but it's not going to change the front in any way, shape, or form. So we'll see what ends up coming out of this Kursk offensive, but it is worth noting this in the general context of Trump's possible Ukraine peace plan being leaked yesterday. Now I'm going to zoom out and then zoom back into Toretsk. So to kind of reorient you here to the map, up here in the north we have Kursk. We're coming down here to Toretsk, which actually sits between a couple areas that have gotten a lot more attention in recent months and years. To the north, well, here we have Toretsk right in the middle. And then up here to the north, we have Bakhmut, Chasiv Yar, of course, a major contention point right now. And then southwest, or almost directly west, we have Pokrovsk. Of this whole area, Pokrovsk right now is kind of the most strategic stronghold by Ukraine. In the last few days, we have seen Toretsk fall. So you can kind of see the advance of Russian forces through here. We'll play this back a couple days. Not a lot of map progress per se, but Russia just within the last, I want to say 48 hours, officially claimed that Toretsk had fallen. And you can see how part of the challenge here is when you actually make that determination, right? Is it when you get to a certain intersection? For Russia, it looks like they've made it all the way through and had been there for a period of time before finally making that determination and making it public. Toretsk is now theirs. Now, an area that we had looked at a couple days ago is a little down here to the south. One of the concerns is that this area west of Krakow is starting to look more and more concerning for Ukrainian forces. Russians are moving in from the north, and there's a possibility that some Ukrainian elements could be cut off in here. There's no news at this point, or any new additional news of the Ukrainian forces in that pocket. But moving back up here to Toretsk, I do have a couple pictures and videos to show you to kind of give you an idea of what that battlefield looks like right now. So Kate from Kharkiv posted a video here. This is Kate's account here. All of these will be linked in the description below if you want to check them out. Go ahead and play this video to give you an idea of what some of the destruction looks like right now in Toretsk. I can't tell if it looks better or worse with the snow laying on top of it. Like when you see these piles of rubble, but there's a soft, white, calm blanket of snow, at times it makes it look like it's not that bad. Like right there, that big pile of rubble up front, the snow almost makes it look less severe, if that makes sense. Or maybe that's just me. But of course, I mean, there's no hiding the fact that these apartment buildings and multi-floor structures are just gutted. No ceiling on these structures, as far as you can see in any direction here. At one point, Toretsk had about 30,000 people that called it home. I haven't seen stats on how many are still there. I've always been surprised as this war has gone on how civilians have kind of hunkered down and dealt with it, even in Bakhmut. When you would look at some of the destruction around Bakhmut, you might think there's no way that anybody would be there at all. But as Russian forces moved all the way through the town and some of the westernmost areas, there were still reports coming out of the 1-2 off civilians that had hunkered down and tried to ride out the storm. Again, I don't know what the number of civilians might look like in Toretsk, but I know Ukraine has been trying from very early on to get them out of there as quickly as possible. So again, a couple more pictures from the battlefield here. And it's been like this for a bit, right? Toretsk has been at the center of the fighting for quite a while now, so Russia has had a lot of opportunity to really find any Ukrainian forces that are inside the city, anywhere near the city, and bring those areas down. This is one last one that Kate posted. Again, I think the snow in these kind of makes this look better than it is, right? This almost makes it look like just a small town in winter. It's when you get into some of these other pictures, you start to see that actually the entire area, it's not that nice. It's complete destruction. All right, now I want to shift over into this possible ceasefire deal. And listen, we're going to take this with a huge grain of salt for a couple different reasons. One, it was leaked by the Daily Mail. And I got it. I mean, that is essentially like a tabloid. And I think that might be a generous way of putting it. So we got to keep that in mind. Also, in terms of what the response has been to this at this point. So Ukraine, from everything that I've seen, has said this is not official. There's no truth to this agreement. And there has been some speculation that this could be a Russian leak, bear with me, to try to kind of shift perceptions ahead of the actual negotiations taking place. So keep that in mind as we get into this. Texas Actual, appreciate that, man. That's awesome. Love that you're tuning in from Ukraine. It's always humbling to hear from anybody that's in Ukraine right now. So Walter Bloomberg here, again, all of this linked in the description below. We'll run through a couple of these points, and we'll bounce back and forth to the map to give you an idea of everything we're talking about here. So the big notes are ceasefire by April 20th, not an end to the war, a ceasefire by April 20th. Later on, they say by May 9th, the agreement to end the war would be in place. So this would include no NATO membership, territorial concessions. Ukraine would be forced to recognize Russian sovereignty over annexed lands and withdraw troops from Kursk, a demilitarized zone covered by European, British, but no U.S. troops in that DMZ. I'll show you in a second what that might look like. EU assistance for reconstruction, $486 billion over a decade. you just saw Kursk. I feel like 486 billion is low, but it's outside my area of expertise. Some additional meetings between Putin, Zelensky, and Trump. And then they're talking about down here at the bottom, the possibility of a continuation of U.S. military aid for Ukraine and possibly a pathway to EU membership for Ukraine by 2030. So again, take this with a big grain of salt. I'm going to come back into kind of the analysis of this in a second, but to give you an idea of a couple different things we're looking at here, when they say territorial concessions, actually this map might end up being better. This is the Daily Mail. So I don't know, this might be the first time I've ever used Daily Mail as a source in a video, but here we are. So we're at least going to try to go off this a little bit. So this is the map they use to talk about this possible peace plan. I'll pull this, try to make this a little bit bigger so it takes up more of the screen. And the couple key points here is Ukraine withdraws from Kursk, the area that we were just talking about. All of this red would then be ceded to Russia. And there's some nuance there we'll get into in a second. And then it looks like there's a small demilitarized zone somewhere in here. And on the surface, I got it. That sounds simple, like you just create a buffer. But like one side or the other is going to have to give up their territory at that point to create that buffer zone. Or they each give up equal portions, if you will, right? So there'd be some sort of buffer zone there patrolled by EU and maybe British troops, no American troops. So a couple of the key aspects here, again, going off of our Daily Mail graphic, which is actually working out pretty well at this point. So this is one of those agreements where nothing in here is really new or groundbreaking. It's all been brought up before, and it's hard to see that either side would jump at this anytime soon. So the reason for that is, well, there's a couple. So first off, Russia has considered all of this to be their territory. They held a referendum over a year ago, and they said all of the occupied territory is ours. It's now official. Like 99% voted in favor. 100% legitimate elections. No reason to doubt that at all. Now, if you freeze the front lines, part of the problem here is they said that all of Luhansk, all of Donetsk, all of Zaporozhia, all of Kherson is Russian. But if you freeze the front lines, Russia has not taken all of those territories. So it's one of the reasons that Russia could push back on this is if they're going to say they own Zaporozhia, but they're missing a large part of this territory, but that is actually Russian territory according to their government. Do you see the bind that puts Putin in? So they're just going to allow international peacekeepers on their territory. Now, I should note that nobody around the world recognizes that as Russian territory. It is sovereign Ukrainian land, but that's one hiccup. Another one, moving back to our Daily Mail graphic, is Russia's been very adamant against any sort of peacekeepers on their border. So remember, one of the arguments that Russia had in starting this war is they don't want NATO on their border. Of course, they're ignoring the actual NATO countries on their border, and they're saying just Ukraine. We just don't want this NATO on our border. It's hard to see a situation where Russia all of a sudden is like, yeah, but British and EU troops, that's going to be okay. And I get how somebody could come into this and say, hey, British troops operating on their own is not NATO, and the EU is not NATO. Anybody who's been following this war knows that anybody or any element, any company, any nonprofit from any country that is inside of NATO, Russia views as NATO. So like that seems like a hard no from the Russian side. On the Ukrainian side, they're going to be forced to give up a ton of territory without any security guarantees, and they're watching the same stuff you and I are watching. They're seeing Russian day in and day out talk about how any sort of ceasefire would just be temporary, to allow them to rebuild and re-equip and kind of reset to continue the war at the time of their choosing. So something that I'm stuck with a little bit in looking at this is, first off, I don't want to be the guy that just throws a wet towel on everything and says, that's stupid, it can't work, because I'm not the one tasked with coming up with the difficult decisions here. But, you know, there's this argument that a good negotiation is when both parties come out of it happy, right? But then it makes me wonder, like, is the next best thing when both parties are upset, right? Because if you leave a negotiation and one side is happy and one side is upset, that really sets the stage for a problem down the line. Clearly, we can see that. What happens if both parties are upset? Like, is that better or worse? I don't know. But the way this is set up right now, Russia is not going to be happy. Ukraine is not going to be happy. And I think Europe is not going to be happy, honestly, just given the concerns that Russia is just going to be pausing for a period of time before pushing further into Ukraine. So again, this is the leaked plan right now. Take it with a huge grain of salt. It's nothing shocking, but supposedly Trump is going to be presenting his plan himself at the Munich Security Conference, which I believe is February 14th, so on or about 1 week from today. Now, I do want to shift over into some interesting media that came out here in the last couple days. We've got 2 videos that I'm going to play. The first one is spy versus spy. Is kind of the best way to put this. So the first one is a video just released by the Russian SVR. This is their CIA, essentially, their Foreign Intelligence Service. This is a video they put out to try to recruit Americans to join Russia. Now, this isn't happening in a vacuum, and I'm only going to show 2 videos today, but this stuff has been going on for a long time. I just think it's fascinating each time it occurs. So we've got one from the SVR trying to recruit Americans, and then as soon as we wrap up this video, I'm going to show you the CIA video that kind of preceded this, and it has English subtitles, and it's going to be the CIA video trying to recruit Russian scientists to essentially report or like contact CIA. It's interesting, but we'll go ahead and play both of these real quick and talk through them at the end.
My granddad always told me, life is like a rodeo, and all you have to do is stay in the saddle. Even when you're scared to death, you just keep on riding. What could be more precious than our freedom? Our grandfathers once saved the world, fighting side by side, brothers in arms. We swore an oath on the Elba in April 1945 to prevent a new war, pledging that we would be friends, never to meet as enemies on the battlefield. Let the horrors of war never happen again. I walked into the empty room of the hospital ward, but my granddad's voice still echoed. Don't trust those who would divide us. Remember, we all fought together for the truth. Our grandfathers' flags matter.
America's pledge at least
Here we go. Turns it modern.
$5 billion to Ukraine. That includes military aid in the form of shells, tanks, rockets, cannons, anti-tank launchers.
The Biden administration will soon provide Ukraine with anti-personnel landmines, the explosive devices which are banned by most countries.
Does matter. Be worthy of our grandfathers. Raise their flag high. Your option is a better future for the nation.
All right, and I'm going to pause it there because the next screen is a whole link about how you can contact Russia to join them, I guess, and we're not going to be throwing that information up on this channel. I feel like that's going to roll the dice. So a couple interesting things here. First off, how it went from straight Western. Like, I wonder how well that plays because, like, back in the day, maybe I just saw a graphic about how, like, Western movies have fallen off, how it used to be a big thing, and it was, but, like, that's just not Americana as much anymore. So I thought that was interesting, and we'll go PG-13 for a second. Where's this video? Yeah, look at this. The guy going in for the kiss, and he won't give it up. Watch. Go, 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 go. had to get that documented for the sake of history. The Nazi piece is interesting because most Russian channels aren't even pushing that anymore. When you hear most stuff from Russia, they've kind of given up on the whole idea or the denazification thing. Like even their citizens now are mostly kind of mocking that. So it's interesting to see that they did throw that aspect in there. But so that's the Russian one. That's, come join the Russians, I guess. Die on the front. Suck up some FPVs. We'll shift over to the American CIA one here, or just CIA. I guess I don't have to say American CIA, and see what they have to play. This one just came out a couple weeks ago, so it's a little bit older. It does have subtitles. I should note, this one is for a Russian audience, so it's in Russian, English subtitles.
Ну вот и снова наведались столичные волки. Прикрываясь нашим знаменем, они едут на восток, разыгрывают заинтересованность в благосостоянии страны. Но на самом деле просто ищут таких, как я. Каждый день приносят новые, все более неразумные требования. Мы были предназначены для гораздо большего и могли бы построить все, что угодно. Но сейчас большинство светлых голов молодого поколения уже уехали. Достижения нельзя измерять в отрыве от всего остального. Истинный прогресс требует сотрудничества. А мы перестали быть частью мирового сообщества, в котором мы когда-то занимали ведущую роль. Такое ощущение, что моя жизнь превратилась в сплошное противоречие. Мне столько раз приходилось поступаться своими принципами, что я едва узнаю себя. Что случилось с тем человеком, за которого она вышла замуж? Я всего лишь хотел пойти по стопам своего отца. Он часто говорил мне, что суть науки заключается в процессе открытия. Ее нельзя подделать, ей нельзя манипулировать. Я как-то сбился с верного пути. Но я знаю, каким путем нужно идти к правде. Говорят, что человек встречает свою судьбу как раз на том пути, который он выбрал, пытаясь ее избежать. Мое будущее уже не будет подвластно этим волкам. Мой выбор — быть пастухом.
All right, there we go. So a couple different takes. I feel like it's really interesting. It'd be interesting to see the breakdown of why the two sides decided to kind of target different people, right? Because the Russian one was going after, at the beginning, there was a little pamphlet that said CIA. So they're going after like spies, and they were playing on our sense of history and like do what your grandparents would like. I'm not, I don't want to speak for my grandparents. I don't think that they were great big fans of the Soviet Union, but maybe that's just me. But shifting over to the U.S. one, this one's one dialing in on scientists, kind of like their sense of right and wrong, and like what are you actually doing? Who you're working for isn't actually benefiting you or anyone around you. It'd be really, you think about, this is marketing in a sense, right? It's just like very, lethal marketing, if you want to put it that way. It'd be interesting to sit in the meetings and understand like why they decided to go after one group or the other. And this is, of course, just one video of many. I did notice on the top of this screen, I meant to say this earlier, this video came out without subtitles. This group here, Wind of Change, looks like they added the subtitles. So Igor here, his channel will be linked in the description below. I'll be sure to give a donation to Wind of Change since I'm using their translations in this video. Now, this is, parts of me want to be like better than this, but I can't help it sometimes because it's so entertaining. So there was amidst the USAID shutdowns, if you will, in the last couple of days, there was this video here going out talking about how you just need to look at the pictures. There's nothing in here about doesn't really have to listen to it, about how USAID was paying celebrities to go over to Ukraine, and right away. Like, so there's a couple key, it's fake is the bottom line. It's fake. And that's why what ends up being really funny here. So if you see at the bottom here, it has E! News. So it looks like this came from E! Well, E! was like, well, that's not on our site. We didn't make that. Doppelganger is a strategy that Russia's done in a couple other ways. Recently, they've been pulled down. They did it in France for quite a while. A big network uncovered there, where what they're doing is the best example would be, I think NYT.com is NewYorkTimes.com. For sake of argument, let's say it is. Russia would create a website, NYTimes.com, let's say, and they would scrape the actual New York Times website, upload 90% of the original content, and then they would publish their own couple articles on there that might be hypercritical of Ukraine or of NATO or something like that. So then, and the site's going to get zero traffic, but when their bots or whoever wants to shares out an article from that site, at first look, it looks like it's coming from the New York Times. So it gives it this air of authenticity. But nytimes.com is not the actual website. You see what I'm saying? So that can make the rounds before anybody actually picks up on it. And France, within the last year, picked up on a major network doing that. That's the hallmark here. E! News came out, said, we didn't make this. What the hell? But it spread very, very quickly. And there's a reason that I have Donald Trump Jr.'s page up here, because it spread so quickly that we actually had, now there were community notes added, but it spread so quickly and so far and wide, Russia ended up chiming in and saying, God, that was good. We should do that again sometime, guys. So there's a couple different ones here. Rybar, which a major media outlet in Russia, they said, the news turned out to be fake. It was really good, just turned out to be fake. They said it was largely due to Musk and Donald Trump Jr. who shared this. And they essentially pointed to this campaign as saying, like, that was really good. That was really effective. We should do more of that. So what they said was, in this case, we were talking about a good example of information warfare. The authors have captured the current trends of the Western media field and successfully played on the theme of the senseless infusion of USAID funds into Ukrainian grant eaters. And then they, let's do more of that. Listen to this. Against the backdrop of the revision of foreign aid announced by Trump, new episodes of thoughtless spending and funds will emerge, which can and should be used to discredit the so-called Ukraine in the eyes of sponsoring countries, including by approaching the issue creatively. So Russia, just out and out, shortly after this story kind of spread like wildfire, just said, this was actually a great information campaign. We should do more of it. It was fake. Wish it wasn't, but we should do more. In fact, Russia Today even came in on that, saying, we would love to gloat about it, but they debunk the thing as not being genuine. Just an interesting piece here. I don't fully understand that. There's a possibility that RT and Rybar is using this as a way, if they debunk certain things, it may lend some legitimacy to some of their future efforts. But I couldn't, what world are we living in here in 2025 where RT is debunking an aspect of what feels like Russian propaganda? I should note that this claim, the reason you're seeing it referred to as Russian disinformation is a couple reasons. I think it might have originated with something that is associated with like a Russian botnet, but the doppelganger piece is one that's kind of a trademark of Russian disinformation campaigns. And then this whole concept that the United States is paying millions of dollars to Ukraine, who does that help? That fake story helps Russia directly more than anyone else. So that's why it's being referred to as a Russian disinformation campaign. Whether it actually came from the state or a private entity or some mix of the two, I think is to be determined. My favorite part of this one, though, is when you get down into the comments and people are just angry at Russia Today. Like, how dare you? How dare you dispel what we have here? It's not a video; it's paperwork from USAID. I like seeing the people upset at Russia Today. That's not what I expected in February 2025. But again, if interested in any of these clips or any of these videos, all of them will be linked in the description below. And as I mentioned, the CIA video is available without subtitles, but I use the English subtitles, so I'll make sure to give a donation there to Igor's group, whoever is linked in that one. But that'll do it for the official update. looking at Ukraine. Thought we'd transition over now, see what else you guys want to get into. We can do Q&A. We can dive into some research on any number of things. I can't believe I made it this long. I'm feeling kind of sick. I've been sneezing all morning, but it's out of the system. I know there were a couple Texas Actual. Appreciate the support, man. You're hammering the chat. Hey, hopefully the chat's more useful now. There were a couple things we put in place over the last few weeks. I see Jack in there moderating. Appreciate that, dude. Bunch of channel supporters. You guys are awesome. We made a couple changes. First off, we switched over to, again, adding some moderators. There were none the first time around, and that was chaos. Just spam. There was so much spam. It was hard to even look at chat, which was really frustrating. So we added 3 moderators. We'll see how right now that seems to be going well. If we need to add to that, we'll add to that. But Jack holding it down right now. Slow mode. There you go, Jack. Slow mode is doing well. So slowed the chat down a little bit. And then the last one is people have to be a subscriber to the channel for at least one day before they can comment, which I feel like that's going to be the same thing. I don't want to change the chat like any more restrictive than that. I don't like the idea of like a member-only chat or anything like that because I think there's some value in exchanging ideas. And probably, I can't keep a great eye on the chat throughout, but there's probably a lot of disagreement with me. And I think that's a good thing. And great if there's another forum to do that. Let's see, just a boring white dude. What a name, man. You think the plan to remove Palestinians from Gaza will go ahead? There's a lot of different plans here, and it's really hard to tell what's going to play out. So let me pull up a map here. It's always easier for me to talk through this. So anybody who... it is so hard. It's like bordering at times entertaining, but also like the things that are entertaining are terrifying. Like these are very real events. Watching a couple days ago, so Trump said in a kind of sit-down meeting with Netanyahu, we'll move the Palestinians out and they won't ever come back at all. And like that is a crazy storyline by itself, if anybody ever says that. So to hear that from a U.S. president is like groundbreaking news. That is, not to mince words here, that is ethnic cleansing, right? Forcibly removing a people from a certain area and not permitting them to return. Of course, that got glossed over because like 30 minutes later, he's like, we might take over Gaza and that's going to be ours. So the question here, and there's a couple big questions here. One, the Palestinians have shown no signs of wanting to leave the Gaza Strip. And I feel like that issue is being overlooked right now. So we're spending a lot of time of the conversation on where they're going to go. And there's been talk about Egypt and there's been talk about Jordan. And we've had both Egypt and Jordan say, no, we're not going to accept 1 million plus Palestinians. We'll see if they can be leveraged into doing that. But even if they are, that's only one part of this thing. Arguably, the bigger challenge is how are you going to be getting 2 million people, we'll say, out of the Gaza Strip that don't want to leave? Inevitably, you're going to have some people that want out. No doubt. There will be some that'll say enough's enough. We've been through this cycle too many times. Our home is destroyed. If we have the opportunity to leave, we're going to leave. Some will. Others will not. And Hamas, are they going to leave, right? Especially if the writing on the wall is you may never be able to come back. That's the biggest concern of the Palestinian people, is if they step out of the Gaza Strip, they won't be able to return to their homes. So you'd have to find a way to get those people out of there. And you have Hamas at that point. Look at how they held on and how they were fighting just now, with the understanding that Israel eventually was going to leave, right? Like, for the most part throughout this war, there was never really a belief that Israel was actually going to push the Palestinians out. It was make it, if you go to kind of the extremes, it was make it untenable for the Palestinians to live there, that kind of thing. But if they believe that Israel or the United States or some other entity is coming in there to push the Palestinians out for good, I feel like we're going to see a totally different side of Hamas fighting this war. Probably more people picking up arms, because at that point they are genuinely fighting for their land because it's on the verge of being taken away from them. So I don't know. That sounds like a very serious thing to undertake. We haven't done that. Like the U.S. doesn't. We don't have a good example to point to as to how that could be done cleanly at all. And that's probably the best way to put it, is that there's nothing about this that would be clean. Ivan, the unrelenting, appreciate the support, man. Fellow Tennessean. So it's, I don't know, the challenge with Trump. So if we, the hard part here is you have to separate Trump from this policy. And I should say it has been absolutely hilarious. And again, I feel weird saying that because these are very real situations, but I find it hilarious when people in his cabinet have to find ways to defend things he said. And we watched a bunch of people like kind of walk it back, like, well, that's not what he meant. And it was definitely no troops, boots on the ground. And then Trump comes out and he's like, no, I meant like whatever we need to do. If it's troops, then it's troops. So it is kind of funny watching like Rubio and Hegseth right now, Secretary Rubio and Secretary Hegseth, kind of figure out like how do they actually walk this line when it's pretty clear they didn't know that that comment was coming. But we'll see. A lot of the pushback, if you will, is that this is just phase one of a negotiating tactic, trying to get people to do more under the concern that the U.S. might take over. I don't exactly understand that angle. So I can see how that plays out in certain circumstances. The tariffs, for instance, right? With Mexico and Canada, whether or not you agree with the strategy he pursued there, the whole concept of we're going to lay a tariff on and then that could set the stage for concessions. You can see where that could come from. In this case, the Palestinians don't want us there. The Egyptians don't want us there. The Jordanians don't really want us there. Nobody really wants us in Gaza. The Iranians don't want us there. The only people that would really be in favor of the U.S. going into Gaza is Israel. And if I was an Israeli, I'd be on board with that too, because why not? So it's hard to see exactly what leverage and to whom he's trying to apply that right now. We'll see. It's definitely worth keeping an eye on, though, because, again, just kind of casually floated the idea of the U.S. heading back over to the Middle East, which is, you know, I'm sure we've probably got other things to deal with here. Europe. Who's going to rebuild it? Who has the money? Who will keep the peace? That's kind of one of the top questions right now, man. And that was where the press secretary, the White House press secretary, kind of tried to walk it back, which is, again, there's a kind of an entertaining aspect of this where she said, no U.S. troops. The entire thing that the president is talking about is getting the Gulf states to pay for reconstruction. Well, that's been a conversation from the start, not that they will do it, but who the hell is going to pay for this? Because, I mean, you saw the pictures in Ukraine. They said $430 billion to rebuild Ukraine, which is a massively larger territory than the Gaza Strip. But when you look at some of the areas in Gaza, like there's nothing left. You're going to have to rebuild entire sections of that from ground zero. In fact, I heard somebody recently, I think it might have been Witkoff. I feel like I'm always mispronouncing his name, but Trump's envoy to the Middle East, saying it's not as simple as just moving the rubble out, because inside that rubble, you have unexploded ordnance, not just IEDs and rockets from Hamas, but unexploded bombs, mortars, missiles, whatever it might be from Israel. Because every military, even the most advanced military in the world, we have a dud rate with our munitions. So like, yes, Israeli bombs did not go off. So you have to deal with those. But the Hamas tunnels underground were not exactly done like perfectly to be able to build on top of it safely, right? I mean, you've seen some of these tunnels. At times they just started going down through a house, underneath a church, across a cemetery, underneath a road. Like, so what Witkoff was getting at is it's not just clearing out the rubble and it's not just rebuilding. There's going to have to be like excavation, in a sense, of clearing out those tunnels and sealing them in and making sure that the ground after they're sealed is actually stable enough to hold anything above ground, right? Because imagine somebody goes in there and starts building and then the thing collapses in on itself because there happens to be a Hamas bunker under there that had not been identified. That's crazy. And when you start getting into those details, you start to get really pessimistic that there's going to be any real long-term stability in Gaza. Because you go from like, well, a couple months, maybe a couple years to clean the rubble, a couple years to build it up. But now it's clear out the rubble and do these intensive underground surveys. Like it's a major effort. I don't know. I don't know what the incentive is going to be for people to go in and do it. So right now, there's clearly a security situation. If anybody were to go in right now, I mean, we've seen the hostage releases. In fact, let me see if I can find a video I'll show you here of today in the Gaza Strip. Like, it's hard to imagine any group from any country saying, yeah, here we go. This is Gaza today. Like, it's a well-armed Hamas organization still operating. So, like, no Western, like, the United States isn't going to be able to just go in and start rebuilding. Hamas hates us. Like, and understandably so, but Hamas blames, when they look at Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad, some of the more hardcore Palestinian groups, when they look at everything that's happened to them, they blame Israel first and foremost, and the United States is like 1B, if you will. So like Israel 1A, United States 1B, and sometimes they'll flip that around to say Israel could not do anything they were doing without the United States. So like the hatred is there, but the immediate target is Israel. They can actually do something against Israel. Of course, we've seen what Hamas's capabilities are. There's nothing they can do at this point to directly strike the United States. If U.S. contractors started showing up in Gaza right now, like, they would be a target. I don't know how else to say that. So the U.S. isn't going to do it. As it sits today, there'd have to be a significant counterinsurgency operation to the degree that we haven't really ever done, or at least been super successful in, right? I mean, you should kind of go back to portions of Iraq and Afghanistan throughout that war, and that wasn't safe for contractors. We were losing troops left and right. So yeah, man, no clear solution here, and which is why I understand the whole think outside of the box, and is there another way that we can approach this? Hopefully people smarter than me trying to figure that one out. Kyle, would there be a feasible option for inspections from a neutral committee to check the ordnance, weapons before and fortification building? Yeah, Kyle, I don't think it's an issue of the neutral piece. I think the technology there is very, very complex. To be able to go into some of these areas and actually, let's see if we can just search up a picture here real quick. Yeah, so it's a perfect one here, right? It's from February. It's not. It's a good point about the neutrality. Like maybe the Emiratis could go in, right, or the Egyptians or the Saudis, a group that they wouldn't be necessarily targeted by the Palestinians, but would be trusted by the Israelis to do it in a manner that wouldn't be, putting Hamas back into power. My understanding is that it is a very, very, very complex ordeal, as in, like, if you get in here and you find a bomb that like fell through and landed in the second story there and set and hadn't detonated, there's only so many organizations in the world that can effectively do that. And then when you start getting into the underground piece, there's probably only so many organizations in the world that can, again, look at the size of this area that all of that has to be cleared out safely. And then the entire time, check for ordnance. So you've got EOD teams going through this entire thing before you bring construction in. And then you start doing the underground survey work. I don't know how many groups there are like that, Kyle. I feel like it's probably situation dependent, right? In certain places in the United States, you might need like deep underground survey work to be done, but probably not everywhere. And that I got to think that equipment's pretty expensive, probably kind of a nuanced group that's able to pull that kind of thing off. Yeah, it's wild. Jason called radar. I think it's more than that, is my understanding. And I could be talking out my ass. This is not my area of expertise, but it's ground penetrating radar over a wide area and then mapping that to identify, again, because when you're looking at Gaza, it's not a matter of like, is there a pipe here or not? It's the tunnel network that does not follow roads and like weaves in and out between different buildings and is wider in some areas, deeper in others. So the technology might be radar, but I have a feeling, like what I've always wanted and always thought would be really valuable is this overlay of all of the Hamas tunnels in the Gaza Strip. We haven't seen that. We've seen it for small segments, and it looks like an ant farm. You put it side by side in the ant farm and it's all over the place. That's what it looks like. So I think even if it is just radar, I think there's a much larger process involved with getting to that. But God, it's depressing, man. The more we talk about this, like the less confident I am that there's going to be any real solution here. So that's super. Happy Friday, everyone. Bringing you down on that. Yeah, sure thing, Kyle. Jacob, many of the tunnels were flooded. I don't know that many were. Some were. I know that was a conversation early on that the tunnels were going to be flooded. I don't believe that happened in mass. A lot have been sealed up, which, God, it's going to get worse the more we talk about it. So some of those tunnels have been sealed up. There's been concrete poured into some of those. That doesn't make the tunnel sturdy, right? So any engineers would be able to say that if you have a tunnel system underneath a city block and you blow up the entrances, that doesn't solve the problem inside. It just makes it harder to get into the tunnel. And Israel did do that a lot, right? Just sealing it off makes sense. Move on to the next one. And there were some, especially with Hezbollah, where they were pouring concrete into them to kind of seal off certain areas. But it wouldn't have been enough to like fill the entire tunnel. They just would have like sealed up a certain component. So super. This is gonna be great. Chuck Wynn, latest unclassified, and couldn't help downtrodden. Has YouTube been grinding me down, or is the state of the world bumming you out? Chuck Wynn, I'm not trying to be downtrodden. I am a little bit sick right now. I think I'm a little bit sick. My kid got sick like a week ago. Her teacher was sick this week, so I feel like it's just my turn. I don't feel all that downtrodden, but it is a little back and forth. I like what I do, for what it's worth. As we get into some of this stuff, talking about like the casualties in war and the families displaced and the destroyed cities and like how there's no positive future for that, I hate that. I want to make sure I draw that line. Like, I don't enjoy that. I don't wake up and I'm like, oh, good news, there was an airstrike. I'm fascinated with international relations and war and conflict because I think it can bring out the good and the bad in man. And there's very few things that can like bring out those extremes. The wearing down recently, I don't know. I've got a couple trips coming up that are kind of weighing on me in the sense of like just making sure I get everything lined up ahead of time because there's things I've never done before. But net positive, I'd say. Yeah, I don't know. But that's the challenge, though. Like, it comes through. Everything comes through. I don't know. Maybe I'm just not excited about the Super Bowl. That could be a part of it. I don't really want the Chiefs to win, and I don't really want the Eagles to win. So I don't know what I'm supposed to do there. I feel like I have to root for against Mahomes, but that feels stupid because Mahomes is clearly going to win. And, like, that's been on my mind for about a week now. I feel like I'm stuck. So, a lot of things, man. A lot of things. Chase, bringing the info. According to Google, common ground-penetrating radar can only scan up to 10 meters deep. For my fellow Americans, that's 10 dishwashers tall. Appreciate the conversion there, man. And some of these tunnels were deep. And I think part of the challenge would be that they just went everywhere, right? This isn't a matter of like, let me see if I can find a good map of the tunnels real quick. Because like here in the U.S., like we've got construction going on all around our house, and I tried to look up a video showed a picture of me that threw me off on X. So we've got construction going on all around our house, and when they pull out the radar to get down into that, like here we go. It's like a straight line, right? It's along the road, or like it's a water pipe and they generally know where it goes. I think the challenge here would be that it veers off in so many different directions. So this one is in southern Gaza, a 10-kilometer long tunnel. And I think this part up here is the important piece. Like, what the hell does that track along? And so the challenge there is like you have to use radar across the entire area, I guess. I guess if you're not going to build anything, right? If it's agricultural land, let's use this as an example right here. You wouldn't need to do radar there. Like, who cares? You would only have to do it in the, let's say this strip right here, you're going to rebuild it, put homes and buildings, things like that. Maybe you do the radar there. So maybe you can kind of consolidate it and not do other areas, but any road, you'd have to do it under every road. God. Hamas. Stop building tunnels, man. Go Birds. John, a pissed off Canadian. I got it, man. I felt bad about that. I was texting some Canadian friends of mine. I wish I had a good explanation as to the whole North American War of 2025. I was getting ready to make a whole video series, like kind of joking about that because it was so out of the blue. And before I could even get to it, turns out we're back on good terms, I guess. I don't know. I've always had nothing but positive things to say about Canadians. I think it's great neighbors to our north, but holy cow, Trump found a way to piss off a lot of Canadians very quickly. And on that note, the thing that was like most concerning to me, like I'm glad we walked it back. We're back. We're good, I think. The thing that concerned me there is how many people, and maybe they were bots, I don't know. Internet's full of nastiness, but how many people quickly turned and were like, yeah, screw Canada. Like, where the hell did that come from? You know, I don't see that ever. Like, there is not this like secret hatred of Canada floating around, but it made it seem like that all of a sudden. How quickly people turned against. That threw me off. That makes me a little bit nervous because you can kind of see that anger being directed in bad places. So that made the hair stand up. But we'll see. We made it through the week, so we're getting there. Stop building tunnels, man. That is a new shirt. I like that. Kio MC, is it confirmed the Ukrainians lost Kursk? To my understanding, it is. I've seen this is one where Russia has claimed that they have taken it. Actually, let me see if I can find, you know what we'll do? See if I can find some of those Russian announcements claiming that they've taken it. This will work. This is a weird channel. That's why I gave that sound. Try to make this bigger. Uh-oh. All right, a little small. Sorry about that. But this is, so it's a weird channel because it's two majors, which is a good Russian channel, but this is the English version of it, and like it is not a one-for-one. Sometimes they post the same thing, sometimes they don't. But anyways, this was earlier today. This was Russia claiming responsibility for, or claiming that they did take it. Let's see, Russian MOD. Nothing really there. It's all pro-Russian channels right now claiming it. I haven't seen anything from a Ukrainian channel confirming it. So now, for what it's worth, historically, that's kind of how it goes. If it truly did fall, then I would expect in the next week or so, Ukraine might say something about it. But look, this is happening a lot. Kursk is kind of a big deal compared to some of these other settlements, but I would expect usually the way it works is when Russia's advancing, they're a little quick in announcing that something has fallen, or like right away. And then Ukraine sits on it for a period of time, days, maybe a week or so, and then it'll make its way out in some sort of communication. We saw the same thing the other way around, where when Ukraine was conducting their counteroffensive, let's say, they were announcing towns that were falling quickly, like putting that out as quick as they could. And you'd have to wait like sometimes a day or more before Russia would be like, oh yeah, shit, we should have told you that place fell. So that's kind of what Kursk is looking like right now. So it'll be, you know, this right here is looking challenging. We'll see. It's been, look, there's no way. I saw someone in the comments saying, you know, who's winning the war right now, and that's not really something I like to dive into because I think there's too many areas that you can look at here, right? The Russian economy clearly has some issues that they're trying to sort through. They've been isolated on the world stage. The casualties are substantial. But when you look at the battlefield, Russia is slowly moving further and further into Ukraine. And there's no way to parse that. There's areas like Pokrovsk where they've slowed down a bit, but my God, I mean, let's look at this real quick. And this is one of the reasons I love Deep State Map is you can just kind of, let's go back to August. So August was when the Kursk operation kicked off. This is what the map looked like when Ukraine pushed into Kursk. This is today. So you can see Russia's, like the entire line is moving. There's no other way to put that. So challenging spot for Ukraine, no doubt. Paul, what's the point of USA maintaining such a big military only to keep them at home? What would be an effective use of the armed forces today, in your opinion? What mission would the grunts be proud to accept? Paul, that's an interesting one, man, because so when I came up in the military, I was 15 years old when the 9/11 attacks occurred. So I was, when I was 18, we were rolling into Iraq, actually, on or about that time period. So my entire time in the military, or at least on active duty, we were fighting active wars. The global war on terror had a lot of troops in Afghanistan, still some in Iraq. There was a clear mission set there. And there was a bit of a mentality, I think if you talk to veterans, they would back this up, that they wanted to fight. They didn't necessarily like war, didn't necessarily like deployments, but there is something to be said for like doing your job, the job that you train for. And it's not quite like this, but imagine if you play a sport and all you ever do is practice. Like you get really good at that sport, but there is this itch to like actually go out there and play the game, understanding that like the game I'm talking about is life or death. But there is a bit of a feeling for that. We're getting back to this time period right now where it's very similar to like the 90s after the Gulf War, I would say, and parts of the 80s even, where the U.S. isn't actively involved in a war. So we're training to build up in the event of a possible conflict with China, Russia, whoever else it might be. But the troops aren't actually doing that. We have soldiers right now that they will enlist or come in as an officer. They could spend an entire 5 or 10 year career on this trajectory right now and never see combat, which is interesting given what we've been doing for the last 20 years. And it's not their fault, right? It's just the time they happen to join. And I'm sure a ton of them would be very, very happy that that's how their military service played out. In terms of what they could do overseas, I think what we would probably see is more multilateral engagements, things like major NATO exercises, and I think we are going to see that. So whether it's bilateral like U.S. and U.K. or multilateral U.S. with NATO and other organizations, I think we'll see more big exercises. So instead of troops rotating over for a couple weeks at a time or something, you might see a 6-month rotation for a division here in the United States where they actually carry out like war games, if you will, of what would a deployment to Europe look like. And they kind of start to finish, or to Korea, for instance, for some of the guys in Indo-PACOM. Wouldn't be surprised to see that, but it's a very, very different time for the military. I'm a little bit nervous that downtime is going to lead to some in the military wanting to get after it somewhere. Like, how can we use this lethal force? There's a good argument to be had that the force is, when the force is perfectly lethal, it means you don't actually have to you don't have to use it because it's a deterrent. But I'm a little bit nervous that there might be folks like chomping at the bit to go into Mexico, for instance. And actually go after some very clear enemies. I would expect the war on terror is not going to die down. You probably will see a steady state, if not an increase, in special operations actions in places like Syria, still Iraq, mostly airstrikes, but some ground missions still. But I think we're just entering a new phase. Again, the phase of pre-9/11, where we're going to have a military. It might end up downsizing a little bit if we're not actively fighting wars. And focusing more on different aspects than we have for GWOT. So I think it'll be interesting. I'm interested to see how that affects recruitment. And it's not a line. It's not like yesterday everybody was fighting GWOT and today they're not, or I don't know, I guess it would have been when we withdrew from Afghanistan. But people are signing up today for totally different reasons than they were in, say, 2007. And I don't know how that's going to end up playing out long-term for recruitment. Because, again, there's pros and cons. Right? I mean, I had pushback from my family at one point for joining because we were at war. If we weren't at war, I probably wouldn't have gotten that pushback. So there's some people where the door is probably open now, or it wouldn't have been otherwise. But you're also going to have people that are like, why would I join up to do that and go sit in the field in Fort Hood for 1 month out of the year, kind of thing. Victor, appreciate the note, man, from Oregon. Ever consider doing a collab with Jake Bro or Paul from Combat Veteran Reacts? I'd be happy to, man. I think there's only one time ever that I got a collaboration invite and I just kind of sat on it because I was like, that sounds like a bad idea. It was somebody that was in Ukraine that was very pro-Russia that is not alive anymore. Leave it at that. But anybody else, always open to it. I actually haven't had a lot of conversation with either of those guys. I follow both of them. But yeah, our paths haven't crossed. And I don't know. It's interesting. I'd be happy to with either one of those guys. They do good work. They put in, my God, they put in a lot of effort. Jake has been really, really impressive to see the consistency and the quality that he's put out. And the fundraising that Jake does is insane. Like that, I don't think people outside of this bubble, if you will, understand that a random dude on YouTube has raised millions of dollars for Ukraine. That is wild. And I'm kind of surprised that hasn't been bigger news than it is. But let's see. I saw one here about recruiting. Recruitment is way up since Trump was elected. Sam in Texas. Sam, I think there's a little, it's hard, man. It'd be very interesting to see, because that would be looking at like probably the exact election date. The Army pushed back on that a little bit, saying that yes, recruitment is up, but recruitment was doing this because of previous efforts. But it might be. I would probably give it a couple more months to see if they're like, if we really are riding an upward trend, or if, you know, it's something that we can point back to a few months ago or whatever it might be. But look, honestly, like anybody that's a fan of the United States, we should want recruiting to be up. We want people to join the military that want to be there. We want them to be capable and strong and fit and able to protect us if need be. So hopefully, if recruiting is up, I'd love to see that. That'd be positive. Mercado Media, yeah, we were chatting a fair amount a little bit ago. He's a good dude. He helped me a lot with Andrew did help me out with the live stream part of things, because this is. I was trying to figure out like what the hell to do and like how do you do it, and the simple things that all of you probably understand, like you click this button and that button and then you're live and here's how it works. And Andrew is actually talking me through all that, so I didn't trip over myself too awful much. But hey, look, there you go. A couple of you in the stream, I think, found out who that invite was that I was not on board with in Ukraine. I didn't think that would end up being a productive conversation. So that's the only thing that probably the only criteria I have when doing something with someone in terms of accepting an invite is if I don't think it's going to be a productive conversation, if it's just going to be like like confrontational the entire time, like I don't want to do that. I don't enjoy that type of discourse. I don't like listening to it. I certainly don't want to be a part of it. I don't want to waste my time talking to somebody where I just get angry the whole time. And so, you know, those are the ones I probably won't do. But anything else, always up for it. All right, ladies, gents, probably mostly gents. It's like 98% men on this channel, but it's all good. I'm going to go ahead and wrap up for today. Again, all of the links that we used will be in the description below if you want to check those out. But hey, thank you all so much for being here. Really appreciate your support. We'll do what we can to get some more videos out here in the next couple of days, especially around the Gaza stuff, trying to keep up with what's going on there. But hey, thank you all so much again. That'll do it for now. We'll see you.